Hello, welcome. I'm Francesca Boyd and I'm part of the Green City Initiative here at AIPH. This briefing today is one of my favourite topics because green spaces really do change lives, and I'm sure we're going to see many examples of that today. As part of AIPH, we aim to celebrate the power of plants, and we're delighted to share with you that the AIPH Green City Awards are now open. This series of webinars has been celebrating the previous winners. So if you want to find out more and showcase how your city can show off, celebrate the way that plants have changed and transformed your urban spaces, please do have a look at that. You can find out more through that QR code on your screen there. Now, before we delve into today's topic, could I first tell you how today's webinar is going to run? First, I will introduce the MC. This will be followed by our first speaker, after which we will have our second speaker. We will then move to a discussion section. This is your opportunity to ask questions and contribute to the discussion. So please do make use of the Q&A function that you will find at the bottom of your screen. As the presentations progress, feel free to pop your questions in there, and then our MC will filter them through and make it part of the discussion. So I would like to thank the Worshipful Company of Gardeners, our sponsors of today's series, and they continue to support the AIPH Green City Briefings programme. As many of you already know, we capture the latest news, projects, research and initiatives from around the world in our monthly AIPH Green City Global Update. You may wish to sign up today by the link you'll find in the chat. Now, without further delay, please may I introduce Gil Penalosa. Gil is passionate about cities for all people, and he is just perfectly placed for running today's webinar. He has this unique blend of experience, pragmatism, and passion, and has worked with over 350 cities. Gil is the founder and chair of the successful Canadian non-profit organisation 880 Cities, and founder of Cities for Everyone. Gil was elected twice chair of the World Urban Parks, and he holds an MBA from UCLA's Anderson School of Management and received a doctorate honoris causa from the faculty even of urban planning at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. Gil has done some really impressive work, and he's going to share some of the things that he's passionate about with us now, but I'd also recommend checking out both 880 Cities and Cities for Everybody. Thank you so much for being our MC today. Please may I hand over to you.
Thank you, Frankie. Thank you very much, and everyone that is watching. I'm very passionate about AIPH, the Green City, and I want to share some slides. Okay, so today we are about Green City Briefing, growing communities and embracing nature. And we have amazing presenters on an award-winning project in Mexico, Huerto, Roma, Verde. And they're going to present in a minute. But cities are changing and we need to change. This looks like Copenhagen, but actually it's Paris. And Paris is greening Paris. And it shows on what Paris is doing. Any city, anywhere in the world could be doing it. But we just need to have the vision and the will to change and look at the impact. The quality of air since 2007 is completely different how Paris has been cleaning the air through greening Paris. So we need to decide, how do we want to change? How do we want to live? I've been fortunate to work in over 350 cities all over the world, and learning and sharing. And everywhere people say, Gil, what's 880 Cities? Well, 880 Cities is not about parks or streets or walking or cycling. Those are the means, not the end. It's about really how can we help create successful cities where people are going to live happier. And people always say, oh, can my children walk to school and my grandparents ride their bike to get eggs or milk? Well, we talk about the 880 rule of common sense, but common sense seems to be the least common of the senses. But it's simple. What if everything you did in your city, everything, the sidewalk, the park, the crosswalk, the school, the restaurant, the buildings, everything had to be great for an 8 and an 80-year-old? Not 8 to 80, 8 and 80, because the 8 and the 8 is an indicator. So that we do cities that are good for 0 to over 100. We need to stop building the cities as if everyone was 30-year-old and athletic and create cities for everyone. That is the concept. And a few years ago, we had COVID, which was terrible. People said all change. I think our perception changed. And we said, people go outside, go to the parks, but be physically distanced. Well, some people didn't have enough parks. So we remember that the streets are public space and they can have different uses. So people have golf courses where at most 200 people play every day, 200. And they said, as of tomorrow, in 24 hours, this is San Francisco, tomorrow is gonna be a park, and instead of 200 people, they had thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Should these public golf courses be golf courses or parks? The impossible, it's impossible. And we were happy because this was gonna open minds, and maybe we were gonna be able to do a lot of gray to green, which is obvious because the streets are about 25% of the area of our cities. I mean, it seems simple, easy, but unfortunately it's not, because some people want more cars, more isolation. But we also saw schools changing. The schools could be the heart of the neighborhood. And this is how schools could transform, not just a lawn, or even worse, not just a pavement, but really transforming into green areas. And over 300 of these have been done in New York on the condition that it has to be open to the community in all non-school hours. After 4 p.m., Saturdays, Sundays, holidays. The schools is where we should be having the flower markets, and we should be having farmers markets. I mean, in Paris also, they are doing school streets. The schools in front of the school, they are closing it to cars because they pollute all the area. It becomes dangerous, and planting trees. So they do the design and they go back and they do it. And again, this is doable anywhere. We gotta have nature everywhere. Parks and trees. Fortunately, we're learning the benefits of the trees. And actually, that was one of the few good things that came out of the pandemic, is that we realized that the trees and the parks, the green, the nature, is not only good for our physical health, but it's also good for our mental health and could be good for our social health. And the trees are good for everything, managing storm water, for economic development, for cooling, for all kinds of things. And Dr. Cecil Corringer, he has the 330-300 rule that you should be able to see at least 3 healthy trees from anywhere. You should have a 30% tree canopy on your street, and you should have a quality green space within 300 meters. And this is how it should be. Some people say, oh, but what if my neighborhood doesn't have a tree? Well, the best time to plant trees was probably the year 2000, 25, 30, 40, 50 years ago. But the second best time is today. And cities are moving in that direction. It's nice to see, for example, Melbourne. Melbourne has very, very hot summers, didn't have street trees. They started planting trees. Not easy. The retail were very upset at the beginning because people would not see. Now they're extremely happy because people go. They have been able to lower the temperature in many neighborhoods by more than 4 degrees, in specific streets by 10 degrees. And look at those streets without trees and with trees. It's totally different. It's really green in cities. They also help us with the sense of belonging, and we gotta have small parks, big parks, medium parks. At the end of the day, what we really need to have is citywide park systems where we have the tiny urban forests that are popping up everywhere. We gotta have the small neighborhoods that where we meet the neighbors. We gotta have the medium size, the large size, and then it's gonna be very important. We gotta have nature everywhere, at home, on the sidewalk, on the pavement, in the park, in the place where we work, in the schools. And also we gotta have programs within that nature, and it's gonna be wonderful for everyone. I wanna end by talking a little bit about Bogota, because I was commissioner. I've been living in Toronto for the last 26 years, where I created 80 Cities, a nonprofit based in Toronto. But before, I lived in Bogota, and I led the construction of over 200 parks all over the city, small, big ones. This was one of them, big one. The Pope came, gave a mass, then the Pope left, and nothing happened. Nothing happened in 27 years. Why? Because change is hard. You try to change and the cave people show up. Who are the cave people? They are the citizens against virtually everything. But we cannot accept that we need to change. And this is how, in only 4 years, we turned it into the nicest park, very, very green at the heart of the city. And it's something that is quite wonderful for passive, for active, for contemplative recreation, something that can be good for everyone. But of course, also hundreds and hundreds were small ones in very poor areas, because low-income people, they need even more. Low-income people live in small homes, so they barely sleep at home. They live outside, so they need more green, because that is one thing in most cities. The wealthy areas are very green, the low-income areas. Toronto, I live in Toronto. In Toronto, we got 28% tree canopy. The wealthy neighborhoods, 50%. In the low-income neighborhoods, less than 10%. Why? Why this lack of equity? This has to end. And this happens in many, many. So I just want to end this introduction by saying that we need to change. There is not going to be a Martian coming down to fix our cities and plant the trees and green our cities. And if at first we didn't do it as green, this is Rotterdam, they're going to put some bicycle parking. Okay, they do a open, they plant trees. And this park that was not very well used, all of a sudden they green it. So the cities do change. It's not like a river that doesn't go back. The cities can change, even if they were not made well at first, then they can be done. Change is hard. That's why change, because mostly opposing people show up. Oh, I don't want trees. I don't want green. I don't want. All of us, we gotta be the change. Show up. We must show up. Send the emails, make the phone calls, go to the public meetings. We need to focus on the benefits. It's not about parks and trees. It's about the benefits. The parks and the trees are the means to have culture and education and recreation and environment and health and economic development. So I invite you to be bold, to develop a shared vision, and more than that, to have lots and lots of action. So let's get into the topic with our two magnificent guests that are going to talk about the award-winning project. And we are going to, so basically, first, we're going to have a presentation by Dominic, Regester, Program Director at Salzburg Global. And then we're going to have Antonieta Peregrina, Director and Coordinator of Pacto con la Tierra in Huerto, Roma, Verde in Mexico. If anybody has questions, please write your questions and we'll go through the questions once they have finished the presentation. So thank you very much. Let me stop sharing and let's get Dom on the screen. Dom, welcome.
Thank you, Gil. Thank you very much for that introduction. Share my presentation. I would also like very much to thank AIPH for the opportunity to be speaking with everyone today. I'm going to pick up on two of the things in Gil's excellent introduction. One, the importance of schools as agents of greening or loci for greening cities, and then also the importance of activism. So my name is Dominic Regester. I'm the director of the Salzburg Global Center for Education Transformation. Salzburg Global is a small organization set up in 1947 as part of a wave of post-conflict European peace-building initiatives. We work in many ways like a think tank, but we try to advance the spread of new ideas through what we call strategic convening. So working with relatively small groups of people, typically 40 to 50 people per program from around the world, who are all working on a common challenge or issue, but bringing different perspectives to that challenge or issue. So playing different roles in their respective societies. They might be policymakers, academics, activists, teachers, civil society representatives, funders, private sector representatives, and we build connections across the community as a way of developing new ideas, identifying levers for positive change, and then trying to support that change. What I would like to do is kick off with one of my favorite quotes in education from the German philosopher Hannah Arendt, who said that education is the point at which we decide whether we love the world enough to assume responsibility for it. I see that as a critical pole star quote for educators working around the world, particularly at this moment in time. We set up the Salzburg Global Center for Education Transformation just after COVID. We were working with UNESCO on the Transforming Education Summit that was the largest global education meeting in about 40 years that took place in New York in September 2022. And like many, many organizations, we had come to a realization during COVID that our education systems around the world were in many ways on the wrong side of history. They were perpetuating a status quo that reinforced a variety of different structural inequalities. So COVID happened concurrently or alongside big social justice movements that were echoing around the world, like Black Lives Matters, like Me Too, like the growing realization that the climate or planetary crisis was impacting on different communities in very, very different ways, and that education systems were reinforcing the kind of status quo that made those inequalities possible. So many of our education systems, and this has been said in many different fora over the last few years, were designed for a very different kind of social and economic model to the one that faces the world at this point in the 21st century. So we identified 6 areas within the broad sphere of education transformation where we felt that we had some track record, where we knew we had some amazing partners, and where we thought we could make a contribution to a more radical rethinking of the purpose and practice of education. So these are our 6 priority areas. The one on the top left, regenerative education, is the one I'm going to focus mainly on today. But these obviously all interconnect, and they're not seen as silos. So when we organize a program, which is primarily about the role of education in developing more inclusive futures, for example, there will be people that we've worked with on social and emotional or regenerative education or education in emergencies who'd be part of those programs as well, because these interconnect and cross-pollinate. The list on the right is the kind of activities that we do, and there's more information about all of these on the Salzburg Global website. So back in or during COVID, we were part of a consortium with the Children and Nature Network and the other organizations listed at the bottom of the screen that was looking at global lessons for greening school grounds and outdoor learning. And since 2021, we've hosted a monthly community of practice. We meet on the 3rd Wednesday of each month. So July's meeting took place yesterday. If anyone on this webinar is interested in joining that community of practice, then you would all be very, very welcome. It's a fantastic, kind, caring network of teachers around the world who are interested in the advocacy for and practice of greening school grounds. The global lessons on greening school grounds work met initially online for about 6 months from middle of 2021. And one of the outputs of that work was this piece of collective advocacy, the Salzburg Statement for Greening School Grounds and Outdoor Learning. There's a link at the bottom, the childrenandnature.org school ground greening has a link to the statement and various different translations of it. I know it's in Spanish and French and German and Chinese and Arabic and Portuguese, and I forget which other languages, but it's available in certainly all of the main UN languages. So this statement, this piece of advocacy, made the case for greening school grounds through 5 particular lenses or prisms. So there is the value and the evidence base that shows the massive impact greener school grounds have on children's capacity to play, and then all of the benefits, that all of the developmental and social and emotional development benefits that more play in childhood brings to children around the world. The second lens that we looked at the case for greening school grounds through was the health and well-being lens. So there is an abundance of evidence well known to everyone on this call, I'm sure, and referenced in Gil's introduction about the value of time outdoors or time in nature on mental and physical health. Our third prism was looking at the academic value or the academic attainment and the social and emotional developmental attainment of time spent outdoors. Our fourth benefit was on the community cohesion, particularly in nature poor communities, and the space that the ways in which, I suppose, much like in Gil's opening, when schools have greener school grounds that can become focuses for communities to access nature, there are all sorts of other benefits. And then the fifth prism was really around teacher autonomy and teachers being able to control the learning environment in different ways. So the statement elaborates on all of these. It was evidence-based. It was put together by a global group of about 90 participants who worked together for 6 months on it, so that we're reasonably confident that it has global applicability. It isn't just designed for countries in the global north or OECD member countries, where I think that it has very much a global relevance. Out of that work, we, along with IUCN and other partners, started to develop this idea of nature-based education. Now, one of the great challenges, I think, facing teachers and school leaders and education system leaders around the world at the moment are that there are an enormous number of extracurricular issues competing for teacher attention and for classroom time and for space in the curriculum. We know that curricula around the world are overcrowded. We know that there is a global learning crisis and that students in an enormous number of countries are significantly below the grade age that they should be at. And putting more and more issues into the curriculum that are competing for teachers' time is not necessarily helpful or the right thing to do. So what we are trying to do with the idea of nature-based education is think about how can we bring together a number of different nature-aligned initiatives that have been gaining in momentum and popularity since COVID, and importance as the climate crisis increases, as it begins to impact on communities in more and more visible and harmful ways. And can we think about building many more points of contact between these different nature-aligned initiatives, so that teachers, classroom teachers who know their students' needs and contexts better than anyone, but also school leaders who have responsibility for deciding to a large degree how time in school is used and where flexibility exists for bringing in additional initiatives, and policymakers understanding the critical importance of the role of education in responding to the climate crisis, can think about how best to maximize the impact of different nature-aligned initiatives. So these could be around biodiversity education. It could be around climate education. It might be around resilience. It might be around responding to other manifestations of planetary crisis. So one of the outputs that we're working with an amazing group of partners and participants on this coming September will be a set of curriculum mapping resources that will allow teachers, school leaders, policymakers to map out all of the different nature-aligned initiatives that are open and available to them in their respective systems, and then think about which ones can be prioritized. Where are there spaces that could already exist in the school day and in the curriculum, and where do we need to try and create new opportunities? So we have the program in Salzburg that will be happening at the beginning of September. Straight after that, we will try and take some of the work to New York, and we're hosting a roundtable with a different set of stakeholders at the beginning of Climate Week. We will then be a partner at the Education Pavilion during the IUCN World Conservation Congress in Abu Dhabi, happening in October. We will be representing the work at the Learning Planet Festival in January of next year. And the people who participate in the program will also be looking for many other opportunities to take the work that comes out of the Salzburg program forward in different spaces. What we want to do more than anything is lead with the ideas that are discussed and refined during that program, rather than leading with any of the partners' brands or brand identities. The role of education in shaping hope or thinking about activism is still being explored in many, many different contexts. But I think it feels unquestionable that we're getting to a point in human history where there needs to be a core component of young people's experience of education, which is posited around the skills that are required to take action in the world to drive change, and the relationship between the aggregation of individual action and significant community behavior change. It doesn't feel like there is, that feels like one of the most viable ways forward for individuals, communities, and larger population groups to meet the challenges of the climate crisis, of the planetary crisis. The final quote I would like to finish with, which I think is the other major Polestar quote for so much of the education work we try to support at Salzburg Global, is from the Brazilian philosopher Roberto Onga, who talks about hope being more of the consequence of action than its cause. So it isn't hope which leads to action, it is rather people taking action which create the right conditions for hope to flourish. Thank you again to AIPH and everyone who has been listening to this for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm going to finish the presentation here and hand back to Gil to introduce the second speaker.
Dom, thank you very, very much. It was lots of information, very interesting, things that are doable across the world, because sometimes people say, oh, but it's Paris or it is, why not Paris? No, it doesn't matter. These things that you were presenting about schools can be done in the schools anywhere, everywhere, big cities, small cities. So thank you very much. And if people, participants, if you have any questions, please write them in the questions. The chat is closed, but the Q&A is open. So write your questions, and right after the next presenter, we are gonna go and start doing the presentations. So now we are gonna have Antonieta Peregrina, who is the Director of UR and Coordinator of the Pacto con la Tierra in Huerto, Roma, Verde, an award-winning project, and it is based in Mexico City. Antonieta, welcome.
Hello, good morning. How are you? It's an honor.
Well, we see you well, we hear you very well, so eager to learn from you. Go ahead.
Super, thank you very much. Well, good morning from Mexico. It's an honor to join this global dialogue and share the story of the Huerto Roma Verde, a citizen-led initiative in the heart of Mexico City. And we believe in building regeneration through nature, waste, and collective action, what we call the Earth Pact. And well, the last year we were honored with the World Green Award by AIPH in the category of Living Green for Social Cohesion and Inclusive Communities. So this award reflects our long-term commitment to restore life in urban territories. To understand our work, we must begin with our territory. Mexico City sits atop the ancient Anahuac Valley watershed, and once covered by lakes and wetlands. And the Mexica civilization developed a sophisticated system of agriculture and water management here, including chinampas, floating gardens that produce food in harmony with the ecosystem. Although urbanization buried the water, its memory still lives beneath our feet. So we see the regeneration as a way to reactive that biocultural memory. One of the neighborhoods built over the lakes, the lake bed is the Colonia Roma, established in the early 1900s during Mexico's modernist push. It was severely impacted by 1985 earthquake, leaving physical and emotional scars, and it experienced a long period of abandonment. And in recent decades, the La Roma has resurfaced as a cultural and creative hub, yet it still faces gentrification, displacement, and ecological stress. This is the complex urban fabric where the Huerto Roma Verde is rooted. The site where Huerto Roma Verde stands has a long and layered history. In 1923, it was part of National Stadium, By 1950s, it became part of the Juarez multifamily complex. And in 1985, then 10 buildings collapsed during the earthquake. Oops. Oh, here. In 2012, the community designed and planned Huerto Roma Verde with the support of La Cuadra, AC, the organization that lead the first cleanup of the spaces and leading by Paco Ayala and Piero Barandiaran. And this is the place, this is the garden, this is the beginning in 2012. And it's still like this right now. But with also, I would like to share another program more than the Earth Pact, but developed by our civil society organization, La Cuadra Provoca Ciudad AC. It's called Cultiva tu Cuadra, which means grow your block. And this initiative focuses on recovering and regenerating public spaces, not only physically, but also socially, culturally, and environmentally. We believe that public space is both the center and the mirror of how we relate, that we share in what we share in common. Through this program, we install environmental infrastructure, create art in public space, and activate pollination and regeneration points to improve environmental health in our block. So the goal is to transform abandoned or green urban areas into green, or in fact, into blue areas, no, living and productive spaces. And just like with the Huerto, none of this happens alone. This is we build these transformations together with the neighbors, local business, nonprofits, governments, and commitment private actors, and for sure friends of the Huerto. And from the experience emerged the Pacto, el Pacto con la Tierra, the Earth Pact. It's a minimum viable agreement of climate actions designed so that anyone can take part in the regeneration of Earth. We believe that the climate emergency requires a territorial, inclusive, and hopeful responses, rooted in everyday practices that rebuild our relationship with nature and each other. The pact is structured around 10 R's: rethink, reduce, reuse, repair, recycle, regenerate, regreen, reconnect, and recognize, and replicate. And each R is a door to action, no? Whether through composting, planting, sharing, educating, or teaching, they help us translate values into practice every day. So one of the clearest materialization of the Earth part is our regenerative collection center. It is a space for circular economy, environmental education, and climate action. And here we receive and trace over 35 types of materials, from Tetra Pak to cigarette butts. And we promote upcycling as a solution. And because it is not about the waste, it's about infrastructure for transformation grounded in community participation. Sorry. So our impact is measurable in growing. Over 900 tons of solid waste diverted from landfills. 800,000 liters of organic waste turned into soil. More than 11,000 participants in regenerative learning experiences. More than 250,000 visitors each year in the Huerto Roma Verde, and growing alliances across society, civil society, private sector, and government. We see the regeneration as a practice of inclusion, science, culture, and everyday action. In addition to community-led actions, we offer strategic services that help scale regenerative impact across sectors. These services are designed to bridge grassroots experiences with the institutional action, making regeneration both measurable and replicable. We offer corporate volunteering in ecological infrastructure. So we design hands-on, purpose-driven activities where companies and their teams contribute directly to projects like compost systems, rainwater harvesting, and native planting. These experiences foster environmental awareness and meaning employee engagement. On the other hand, at the same time, sometimes the waste management programs for offices and restaurants. We help business go zero waste through training, smart collection systems, and traceable recovering of materials, both organic and recyclable. And we work hand in hand with the business to reduce their footprint while strengthening local circular economies. Another thing, and at the final of this process, we give the carbon impact reports aligned with ESGs and SDGs indicators, and we quantify the environmental impact of regenerative actions and translate them into ESG metrics and SDGs. So this helps organizations track, communicate, and grow their commitment to climate responsibility. Through these services, we support public and private actors in making regeneration tangible, local, and aligned with the global goals. Oops. Here you have some examples. We work with Adidas and with Bank of America, with the different corporations, institutions, to do a different kind of activities in this term. And well, the La Cuadra and Huerto Roma Verde together with more than 100 partners have been developing green and blue infrastructure projects for over 12 years. So this work is not only possible because of community. When people, organizations, business, and institutions come together with a shared purpose, we can regenerate not just spaces, but relationships, systems, and hope. We imagine a future where every neighborhood has a space like the Huerto, like the green infrastructure and a scale of the neighbor, no? O sea, barrial, here we say that in Mexico. And where waste is seen as a resource, and where food is local, is the local market with our community, relationships are strong, and the air smells like a soil and flowers, and the pollination is happening, and we are not yet, but we are walking in that direction step by step, seed by seed, and every day. So we invite you to connect with us, collaborate, and visit us in Mexico, and come with us, come to the Huerto Roma Verde and walk our gardens, paths, the plant with us, share with us, and that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonieta. Thank you very much. And I want to invite Dom back so that we can have a dialogue. And remember, participants, if you have any questions, please send them. Dom, a question is about the schools, how to massify the schools, how to make the case. In the US, as an example, the wealthiest country in the world, but 1 out of 3 people who lives in cities, more than 100 million people, do not have access to quality green spaces within walking distance. All of them have access to schools, but most of those schools have fences, and they are closed at 4 p.m. and they are closed during Saturdays and Sundays. There are a few exceptions on the cases that I showed, but the majority are not. So what have you found that is powerful? Because we could really provide access to green spaces and play areas automatically if we open up the schools, but we don't. There's a huge conflict between boards of education and school authorities. So how do you make the case, Dom?
I had a really interesting example from a teacher in Verde in the Netherlands when I was there last year for some work. And they said that they felt, and I think this is true fairly universally in education, that fear is far too often the dominant emotion governing decisions in education. That often parents are very afraid of change because they're worried it's going to have a negative impact on their children's education. Teachers are afraid of change in many cases because they don't want to, again, do something that is untested and might have a detrimental impact on education. Policymakers are afraid of change in education. But when we do see positive change, it overcomes that fear factor very effectively. So with regards to greening school grounds and concerns that there might be vandalism, the school makes an investment in the greening school grounds, it's open to the community, and it is then vandalized. The schools that I know, and this is the teacher in Breda's experience as well, have found that the community is unbelievably respectful and supportive of the greener school grounds and the access that they get to it. And I've heard similar things through colleagues at Children and Nature Network who do an enormous amount of their work is US facing, that when a school is able to make that change, people do respect that. We've heard it from examples in Mexico City as well from educators working there. So I think it feels like it is a risk worth taking because there is an abundance of evidence from different parts of the world that show access to nature is seen as a good thing for almost everybody. Everybody wants more of it. So where the school can become, a way of creating that green space in nature deserts, in urban environments, it's had a very positive impact. There's brilliant, other examples of ways in which teachers and school leaders have been able to articulate the value to the community of greener spaces in densely populated urban areas. So the reduction of heat islands, for example, is another good example where the more greenery it is, it helps lower the temperature of the city. We know that there is a strong correlation between temperature and antisocial behavior in many contexts. So riots that have happened in different cities have happened often at the hottest times of the year. So initiatives that can help lower the temperatures of cities in every sense can only be a good thing. And I think it's a question of trying to articulate that in ways that cut through other noise and reach different parts of the community who might not necessarily see it as a benefit directly for them. The most important thing is to start trying, like you said with your call to action at the end of your introduction. We've got to be out there trying these things in order to see how they land and how they can support behavioral change.
Thank you, Dominic. Yeah, I think there's so many good examples, but we gotta move from examples and from pilots to make it the norm. And that is one of the challenges. Antonieta, I love the Huerto. Actually, I was at the Huerto Roma maybe 10 years ago with Paco Ayala, who's a magnificent person. And I fell in love with the Huerto, and I'm so glad that you got the award. I wanted to ask you also from the point of view of how to multiply, because Mexico has about 20 million people. Mexico City itself about 10 million, and with the metropolitan area, another 10, so it's about 20 million. So how to have 200 huertos in Mexico City, just in Mexico alone, because one is not enough. You have an amazing impact to the adjacent area, but how to have 10 of those? And also, what would be your recommendation of the lessons learned for people to do Huerto Romas around the world, so that people see it and say, oh, I gotta learn ABC from Antonieta and do something like this in Mumbai, or I wanna do it in Cape Town, or I wanna do it in La Paz, Bolivia, or whatever.
Sure, no, exactly. We are doing this like for example, the infrastructure of collective center of the recycling materials. We are giving this as a in a scale and replicate this model in a different kind of scales as a neighbor, for example, as a school, no, as a building. So we are working in to develop and scale a modeling pilot to replicate in a different neighbors. We for example, I am doing a project in Tijuana, and La Cacho colony is like the La Roma, but they're in Tijuana, and they talk with me and they speak like, okay, we really need the Huerto. La Cacho is the name of the colony. Verde, because it's like a space for the community, no, with arts, with environmental education and practices, and with infrastructure of the community, with a space with where the community can talk about their own problems, no, because everywhere is different, but the truth is all the neighbors need to improve the recycling infrastructure. Here in Mexico, we really have a problem with the garbage, well, in everywhere, but for sure, and here is a really a big challenge, because we are producing 20 tons of a day, not daily of garbage. So we need to act. And we are doing a space to inspire the people to replicate this in their neighbors. We are doing this like with art, with architectural design, to inspire to have this kind of spaces in a different points of the city, and all the municipalities or neighbors need to have these kind of spaces as a Huerto Roma Verde. I'm in love too. I am working here, and really, I think I have 20 years working in the environmental field, and I think this is a really good example to replicate everywhere.
Wonderful. And people need to keep in mind that it's not about how to copy Huerto Verde. No, every neighborhood is different. Even within Mexico City, every neighborhood is different. Every city is different. However, it's not like on the computer that we copy and paste. No, but we can adapt and improve. There's so much we can learn from each other. Antonieta, could you mention something about what is the relationship, like a specific example of how the private sector has helped you, or you have helped the private sector, and also government, how these two, the Huerto Verde, one example of support that you have received or given to the government and to the private sector?
Yes, well, in terms of the private corporations and all the private sector want right now is interested to have a ESG's alignment as the indicators and as the SDGs, and we are giving a report of impact to when the corporations have like a volunteering ecological practices with the employees. We give a report impact, and they put it in their ESG's impact report, no? And they have this like check, and sometimes it's like only for the for the interest to have this check, but the truth is the people was at the finish of the work, they are in love of the Huerto, and they feel inspired, and they repeat this kind of practices. And in the term of the government, we have a really good relation with the local government, with the alcaldía, which is a municipality here, and the Cuauhtémoc. And we are trying to expand the Huerto with other area, with the center of the education of action, environmental action. And we are talking right now, we are almost there. We will have the permission to extend our space in the Huerto Roma Verde to have more space for educational and action, environmental action here in the Huerto. And yeah, with the government of Mexico, of the city of Mexico, we give this our award because it was for the city, and we have a really good relationship with the government of the Mexico City. So they know the Huerto, they went sometimes, and we work together to regreen the block and the alcaldía in a different points to fix the green areas together and to fix all the problems that we have in ecological things of the trees and to regreen the areas here in the neighborhood.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so important what you are mentioning, because we need to do alliances. Everyone who wants to add or multiply is welcome. Private sector, government. Anyone who wants to subtract or divide is not welcome. But I'm really glad how you are open and generous and inviting others. And Dom, you spoke about the nature-based education, and now we see a lot of really good cases of nature-based solutions. How when the cities are going to do a stormwater, they piggyback on the work on the stormwater, and they say, oh, let's do a linear park around there, let's plant trees, and let's do even areas that are going to be flooded for a few weeks of the year. Well, they are not going to be flooded for 45 weeks, so let's do it. Can you elaborate on the nature-based education? What would you say are the key elements for someone to move in the direction of nature-based education? The two key elements.
It is putting nature at the center of education planning and thinking. So whether that is about infrastructure and the greening school grounds, and thinking about, both for existing schools, but also schools for the future. How do we have a much more nature-oriented design principles and natural resources? There's lots of evidence supporting the sort of economic and academic development benefits for all of this. It is thinking about nature at the heart of curriculum and the role that school plays in responding to the experience of school can play in responding to the planetary crisis. It's thinking about the environmental consequences of decisions that schools need to take. So one example, which is gaining some interesting traction at the moment, is around more and more schools using generative AI to support teacher workload and lesson planning and marking and things like that. But we know that there are environmental consequences for using generative AI and ChatGPT. So schools thinking through what is the trade-off that they can make in order to compensate for that greater energy use. So I know of schools that have started, I think, inspired by New York City's schools examples in many ways of meat-free Mondays that had an impact on the climate footprint of the city, introducing meat-free days in the school canteen as a way of balancing the environmental books to compensate for greater use of ChatGPT as one example. And then thinking about the final part, I think, is thinking about children's young people's holistic education experience and the opportunities that provides for connection with nature, no matter whether they're going to school in a very urbanized environment or in a rural environment. We need to foster that greater capacity for empathy with nature, for interspecies empathy, and that's a core part of the education experience, so that young people will grow up to be adults who care deeply about the planet and will want to fight for its survival in ways that we haven't seen to nearly a wide enough extent in previous generations.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we need to have both. Like you said, the infrastructure and the programs. Is the hardware and the software. So of course, we gotta green the sidewalks and the pavement and the play areas and even the classrooms, but also the programs so that they get into it. We could talk about this for hours, but we're running out of time. The last question, Antonieta, why don't you link a little bit both? What is the role of Huerto with the schools of the municipality where you are located? Like, do they come to the Huerto, but also does the Huerto go to the schools? How do you link to make this? And also a similar question, not only with the schools, but Antonieta, if you could mention about older adults. The fastest growing segment of the population are the older adults. And they are amazing volunteers. They have lots of time. It's 1/4 of our life. For many people, 1/3 of our life. But usually they are forgotten. They are not engaged. And they could be amazing. It could be win-win because it would be great for the older people, but it also could be great for the Huerto and for others. So two questions in one. You link with schools and you link with older adults.
Well, yes,
Again, Frankie is gonna close up. Yes, go ahead.
sure. Well, with the schools, we have a really good relationship in terms of we are partners of Educa, which is NGO dedicated of the education in all the country, and we are working together with the Schools for the Earth, which is a program that have is a call to a lot of schools, and then they have a auto diagnostic, and then they start to have a better practices in the different indicators of water management, waste management, and everything in all the in the schools. And we are working together with the Educa and with the municipality too. We have mapping all the schools, and we are right now we are working to develop this relation with these different schools in a different scales, because we can find schools, see little schools and big schools. No, for example, we are neighbor of the Juarez school, which is also behind the Huerto, and we are working to develop the waste management program with them. So we have a different scales and with the schools, but for sure we have visitors of the schools. We have all the Fridays we have activities with the childhood in the Huerto. They come to the Huerto and to live in the garden and with the child. The child right now is the summer course, so they have activities there like environmental, cultural, and spiritual. In fact, is the holistic activities there in the Huerto. So we have a different kind of participation with the schools. And with the elders, we have, or with the older people, we have this kind of relation with programs as, for example, Gepetto, whom is a person who works, and he has a very beautiful space in the Huerto Roma Verde, doing a traditional toys of Mexico. And he have 75 years, I think, but he is doing all days activities and courses and everything, and with the elders of the community, and who are the guardians of the cosmovision. We have a really good connection too, because all the Wednesday we have there a Mexica traditional dance. So we are working together to keep and to with the guardians of the tradition of the cosmovision of the Mexica culture. And yeah, in a different ways we are in connection with the elders, no, also with all the traditional and with all the knowledge, and they are integrated in a different way. So like doing the toys, for example, or to keep the tradition of the gardens of the Cosmovision of Mexico. And well, it's a very multi-age place, because we have a childhood, we have elders, we have a people of all the ages in the Huerto Roma Verde.
Antonieta, thank you. And I hope that anybody that goes through Mexico City, please go to Huerto. Roma is a wonderful neighborhood, and Huerto Roma is a magical place. And Dom, you have so much knowledge. I love how Salzburg Global brings people, different knowledges from different parts of the world to come out with specific solutions that are applicable to many other places. So it's about generosity with knowledge, a magical place. And now I leave you with Frankie. Frankie, what a wonderful session. Please close, because what AIPH Green City, it inspires all of us.
Thank you so much. I mean, what a fascinating conversation today, and really showing the many different ways in which we can approach green cities. It's not just about putting plants in the ground, it's also about all those different connections. Please, can I thank everybody for joining us today? First to our MC Gil, and also to our speakers Dom and Antonia. I mean, fascinating presentations and really insightful discussions. I'm taking away finding hope in action, and also that idea of interspecies empathy and how we do it across generations and across different formats. To you, the audience from all around the world, thank you for joining us. Our next briefing is looking at allotments to apartments, urban agriculture successes. We're taking a break for the summer, so we will be back on the 23rd of October. Please do sign up and join us then. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. This session has been recorded and will be available on the AIPH YouTube channel shortly, as well as via LinkedIn, so do share it with your colleagues. Finally, I'd like to thank the sponsors of the briefing series, the Worshipful Company of Gardeners. Until next time, thank you from me and the AIPH Green City team.